Hello and welcome to video number 2, and as I mentioned in what I cunningly called video number 1, this is the video where we look more in depth at the multi-boxing side of things. Now before I dive into the game itself, just a quick word about folders. I actually prefer to have one folder per instance of WoW that I'm going to run, so if I'm going to be dual boxing I like to have 2 folders. And there's various reasons for that, and to be honest, your mileage may vary. If your machine is powerful enough, you probably won't notice a huge difference by having 2 folders. But it's something I prefer to do, and you should try it if you're having problems just using the one folder. Now of course, if you are using just the one folder, you would just start the executable. In this case for me it's the well64.exe twice. Because I'm using 2 folders, I've created shortcuts up here to each individual executable for well 1 and well 2. So let's get that started and I'll see you in game. Okay, and as if by magic I've created 2 new characters over on Earthen Ring. They are Blood Elf Warlocks, and one of them is called Roxy and one of them is called Nina from the Tsar family. Roxy Tsar and Nina Tsar, and they're going to be my guinea pigs for this upcoming tutorial. Now the only things I've done so far is get them into the guild over on Earthen Ring, which is of course the Control Alt WoW podcast guild, Clan of Darkness, which is in my honest opinion the best damn guild in the world of Warcraft. And a few other little bits and pieces, such as turning on auto loot, which for some reason is not turned on automatically, and also things like click to move and a few bits and pieces that you would normally do in your interface anyhow. And there they are, ready to go. Now they've also joined together in a group. Everything you do should be as a group. If you're doing Recruit a Friend, which I certainly hope you are doing, you won't get the bonus XP unless you're in a group. And also you'll want to be in a group for most of the time anyway, because that's how you complete quests. Now the simplest way to multi-box is to open up your 2 instances of WoW, your 2 WoW clients, and simply move between them. As you can see, currently Nina is on follow and is following Roxy, and that was done manually by selecting follow from the drop down menu, and after a fashion is able to help in killing things. So if we start off our shadow bolts and we can find the target that she selected, we can do that again. It's already dead. Anyway, you can see that after a fashion you can certainly multi-box this way by switching back and forth between the windows, but I suspect after a relatively short time, in my case it's about 12 minutes, your brain will turn to pudding, and not the good kind of pudding, but the horrible gooey watery pudding that you get in hospital cafeterias, because it is a pain in the arse to flick back and forth. And this is just with 2 characters. Now if you could imagine trying to, for goodness sake, Quinn box with 5 characters, well, I would suspect sheer madness would ensue. So you can certainly gussy it up and have macros to make it a little bit easier, and do other bits and pieces that will make this flicking back and forth, this alt tabbing say between characters, a little bit better. But there is an even better way, and that is going to be using a piece of software called Keyclone, which I'm going to talk about now. Here we are on the Keyclone site, and as you can see it is not free of charge, unfortunately. It's actually just shy of $20. Personally, I think that's worth the money. I actually didn't spend $20 on it. I got it a few years back when it was just $10, so for me it was even a better deal. It is a lifetime license, so you don't need to worry if there's any updates, you'll get those free of charge, and you only need 1 license per machine. Now that does mean that if you're going to multi-box across several machines, you are of course going to need more than one license depending on how many machines you're using. But in the case of this tutorial, we would only need one license. There's the option to have a 5-day trial. Basically that will send an email to the developer, and I think, although I've never done it, they'll send you a code to allow you to use Keyclone for 5 days, and that may be worth doing if you want to check it out. Now there are other pieces of software that do similar things to Keyclone. I haven't tried those because I was very happy with Keyclone from the first day I started using it. I guess at some stage I will try those out and try and compare them, but for this tutorial I'll be using Keyclone. So let's say that you've gone ahead and you've purchased Keyclone, and if you haven't, the rest of this tutorial is going to make no sense whatsoever. But you've gone ahead, you purchased Keyclone, you've installed it, and it's up there on your desktop. So just a quick double click, and it's up and running. Now the first thing it's done is it's found the different WoW instances. I keep saying instances, but that gets a bit confusing. These are the WoW clients, and it's found 2 of them because I've got 2 of them currently running. And the reason it's done that is because in the setup it's been asked to look for anything that has the World of Warcraft window, which is that bit there, and it's done it. It's done exactly what it should do. As you can see, Keyclone has a lot of bells and whistles, and currently I don't tend to use very many of them because, as I said in previous videos, I use Keyclone across different machines and it's a slightly different setup, but we will be looking at a lot of these bits and pieces as we go along. Initially though, I'm just going to use the very basic function of Keyclone. And what you have to make sure you do is you must always click on OK, because if you click on just apply and you don't get rid of the setup, it doesn't do anything. The Keyclone doesn't actually work, so you need to make sure you always click on OK, and it's in that state before you go ahead and do anything. Now you can see if Keyclone is working simply by jumping, smacking the spacebar, and that demonstrates exactly what Keyclone does. It broadcasts the key press. It broadcasts the spacebar from this WoW client to this WoW client. Very simple, and if there were several WoW clients, it would broadcast it to all of them simultaneously. And as you can see pretty early on, that gives you a lot more control and a lot more power. Now once you add macros to that mix and a few other bits and pieces, you really can make multi-boxing a heck of a lot easier, and that's what we're going to go on to next. So buckle yourself in, because we're about to move on to some macros. Okay, so here come the macros. The macros we're going to be doing, and for the main using all the way through the multi-boxing experience, are very simple. I don't know how many macros you've done personally, but the macro system within World of Warcraft is a particularly easy one. There are many commands which you can use, but they're all relatively straightforward, and there's no real nastiness involved in the macro language. But as I said, the ones we're going to be doing, especially initially, are going to be incredibly simple. The first thing we want to do is to get our teams together and following each other. Now, as I showed earlier on, you could just do a follow by selecting the other character and clicking on follow and then moving around, but we're going to use it as a macro. Now I'm going to create these macros in the general tab because they're going to be used by all the characters that we create as we go forward. So they're going in the general tab so that they're shared across the accounts. And because Keyclone is running over there in the background, we can actually create the macro by typing just once, and it will broadcast the entire macro into each window. That has its ups and downs. Of course, you don't necessarily want to be constantly sending everything from one window to the other and vice versa, because for instance, if you're typing a conversation in Guild or in Say or chat or any of the other areas of communication, it will be sending it in the other windows as well, and it will cause all sorts of mayhem, but I'll show you later on how we avoid that happening. So let's create our very first macro. Now when you're creating macros such as /follow and that type of thing, it doesn't give you an icon naturally. There's no spell involved because it's just a command, it's a slash command. So you do need to select yourself an icon. Now given time, I would go and find something that looked a bit followy, but I don't have that amount of time to go looking, and I'm sure you don't want me scrolling through hundreds of different icons. But we're going to use this arrow, and we're going to call this macro xfollow. Okay, and you can see, if you go back to the window, you can see that it's stuck the cursor in the same place in both windows, and this could not be any simpler. And what we're going to use is a mechanic called focus, and the macro in essence is just /follow focus. Now focus is like a second target, and I'm sure most of you are very familiar with focus. Weirdly enough, it's also the name of one of the powers for a hunter. It's their form of mana, so it's a bit confusing, but in essence focus is a second target. So when you target something, so here I target this, I could also focus on something else, and by referencing that focus I could do other things to that while I do things to this. Not very complex. I mean, it sounds a lot more complex than it actually is, and I'm sure many of you are nodding your heads and understanding focus 100%. So before we can use this macro, what we have to do is ensure that one character is focused on the other. Now when you're setting up macros or when you're multiboxing, you are going to have a main character. In this case it's going to be Roxy, and you know it's going to be Roxy because she has the biggest window. It's totally up to you which character you decide is your main, but the best thing to do is constantly stick to that character as the main. Every other character is a follow character. Now in this case we only have the one, but it would be the same as if we had 5. You'd have 1 main and 4 follow characters. And so what you want is the follow characters to focus on the main. Now later on I'll show you how to do that. You could do that as a macro and have that there. Now in all honesty, you're not constantly having to change the focus, and so you could just go ahead and just use the drop down. But before we do that, let's just drag this to the 2 key. Assuming it lets us do that, yep. So let's drag to the 2 key, and let's create the focus. So like I say, we want Nina to focus on Roxy, and it's a simple matter of going down to the drop down and setting the focus, and as you can see the focus bar or button comes up here and lets you know that that's working. Now it's a simple matter of let's move Nina over here a little bit so we can demonstrate how this works. So we press the 2 key and along comes Nina, and that, let's just take her over again. Let's make this bigger. And there you go. So that's a simple focus macro, and as you can see, every time I press the 2 key, Nina will re-establish the follow, and you're able to move your characters around simply by just pressing 1 key and not having to switch windows. So next up is a target macro. Now I do a target macro because I like to have everything macroed, but I know you can obviously just tab target or even select the target, but actually it's, in my opinion, better to have a target macro that's on your bar. Again, your mileage may vary, so it's up to you, but I am going to do a target macro, and as you can see we're back in the general tab, and we're going to go ahead and create a target macro. Again, don't have time to find a fantastic icon, so I'm going to use this little star thing here, and this macro is going to be called X target. and if possible it's even simpler than the one we just did, which was, and this one is going to be target enemy. Now when I was doing the follow, you may have seen unknown unit popping up here, and that's because this button, I was pressing the 2 button in order to get Nina to follow Roxy, is based upon focus, and at the moment Roxy is not focused on anything, so when it says focus it doesn't know what that is. There's no focus set, but that's okay because we're going to put another macro in its place, because the main character doesn't need to have the follow macro because it's the lead and it does the leading, it doesn't do the following, but what it does do is the targeting. So we're going to drag the targeting menu, or I should say the targeting macro, down here. Second time I've done that, and replace the macro that was previously there. So this means that when I press the 2 key, my main character targets and my follow character re-establishes the follow if they have lost follow. This is a good thing to do in my opinion, because it means that you're constantly making sure that you're on follow. Now it's all well and good having the character run behind you, but of course that's not what you're doing multiboxing for, having many characters run behind you in a trail. You're doing multiboxing so that you can kill things and do quests and so on and so forth. So you do need to be able to do a macro which is going to kill things. So we can do our first kill macro. Now there's 2 schools of thought on this. There's one that would say that you should create a macro which is basically setting up an assist. We're going to use the command /assist, and whenever you press assist you can then go ahead and press one of the spell buttons, and that certainly does work, but it does mean that you'll be pressing 2 buttons pretty much for every spell, at least for every initial spell. So what I prefer to do is to have a assist followed by a cast, and that's what I'm going to go ahead and create now. The only spell that we currently have on these warlocks is Shadow Bolt, so there's not a heck of a lot of choice, but we're going to go ahead and do that. Now this one is going to go into the specific, the Roxy and the Nina specific macros. The reason being is that not every character you're going to create is going to be a warlock, and they're not going to have Shadow Bolt, and so there's no need to have Shadow Bolt on the general macro. And because Shadow Bolt is a spell, it will come with its own icon. So we're going to create X Shadow Bolt. See the pattern here. And the first thing we do is assist, and because we've established the focus, we're going to be assisting the focus, and then we do a cast Shadow Bolt. Now I think Shadow Bolt is actually 2 words. Yep. Okay, and we're going to drag that down to the 1. Okay, now at the moment there's no icon there, but that's just because it hasn't updated, but you can see it soon does do. So we now have 2 keys. One of them is to follow, and one of them is to target. And if I press 2 key now, I've targeted this cub over here. And if I press the 1 key, what will happen is that Nina will assist Roxy, and when you assist you then target the focus's target, and they will both cast Shadow Bolt. And shockingly enough, the Springport cub dies almost instantly. Now you saw the same message come up saying about unknown unit. That's because I use the macro in this slot for the main character. Again, you don't have to do that. You can actually focus your main on itself and you won't get that message, or you can simply just use the main spell here rather than a macro. The reason I do use macros in some of these slots when it's not necessary because it's the main character is that at certain stages, because of a death or because of something else happening, you may need to switch characters, so it is sometimes useful to have them macroed up anyhow. Now you'll notice that I've chosen Warlocks, and I mentioned in the first video that as far as my choice of multi-boxing teams that are the best to do from the beginning, Warlock came in second, and up the top was Hunter. And the reason these are incredibly good for multi-boxing is the pet. And so we can make a quick change just to that last macro. So we go back in and change that. We have to do it on both. And what we're going to do is we're going to just come down here and put in another slash command. And that slash command is pet attack. So what that will do, we'll send the pet in straight away. Now currently these pets are imps, because that's what you get when you start off, so not a huge thing, but if for instance it's a Void Walker, you may want to send the Void Walker in before you start to cast your Shadow Bolt so you can get some sort of focus going. Actually, we can't use the word focus again, but anyway. So it will update that. So now when I come along and target, the pet will have already started its attack. Now it may not actually do it on this occasion because at this level, which is just level 2, you don't have a pet bar. So although pet attack was available to me as a macro, when it hits level 10 I will have a pet bar, and pet attack will be something that I can actually use, so you didn't see the full force of that. But anyway, so there you go, that's your basic set. And I mean, the things that you need to take into account are the use of focus, the fact that if you use slash assist at the beginning of every spell, you only need to press it once, and you can pick and choose which ones you use. Once you've assisted and once they share the same target, then you can use spells which don't have slash assist, but if you get into the habit of doing a slash assist macro for each one of your spells, it makes things a lot easier in the long run. And hopefully you can see how quickly multi-boxing becomes so much easier. And of course there's no need to have this window up. The only time you'll be alt tabbing back to this window will be when your character needs to collect something from a corpse for a quest, and also to be handing in quests and so on and so forth. But we have got things coming up, including the add-on Jamba, which is the next video, that will make things even easier. Also, if you make sure you've selected free-for-all loot as opposed to group loot, it means that your main character can do all the collecting, and if need be, send bits over. Now if there are items, quest items which need collecting, then obviously both characters should be able to get them, so you'll be alt tabbing just to pick up that piece of item. And that's your lot for this video. The next video, as I said, will be about Jamba, and the one after that, or the one after that, will be about a bit more complex stuff with Keyclone. Hopefully that's helped, and I'll speak to you next time.